all of these practices and all of these symbols, they're not about the practices and they're not about the symbols. They're about the practitioner. And the only way they're meaningful is if that you understand how to use them in a way that helps you in your own life, your own journey up the mountain, right?
Welcome to Jess on the Mountain, a podcast about yoga, chakras, and becoming your own guru. I'm Jess Goulding, and I am excited today to bring one of the master teachers that we have in yoga today. His name is Youre Kraftsow, and he is back out in the world, as always, teaching teachers, teaching students, and bringing the vast library of knowledge that is in him to those of us who would be benefited to receive it. So welcome, Youre. Thank you for coming.
It's an honor. Thank you for inviting me, Jess. I'm really happy to be with you and your community.
Thank you. Yes, we're excited. There's been a lot of chatter, so I'm excited to talk to you here. But not everybody who listens to the podcast is going to be familiar with your name. And so if you would love to just share a little bit about, your journey here or what you like to teach and your background.
Yeah, I'll make it simple, but I'll share a few things that are sort of out of the ordinary, people not knowing so much about me. I began as a young man early in my late teens, really interested in religion. I was a religious studies student as an undergraduate. I studied Lao Tzu. I studied Catholic teachings, the mystical teachings of Judaism. And then one day, and I was about 18, I remember I encountered Patanjali. And I was a gymnast in high school. And I didn't get exposed to yoga through asana. I got exposed through the religious studies and found Patanjali's teaching, and it was just like an aha. And really, honestly, 6 months after that, I was in Krishnamacharya's house. That is the guru of Iyengar and Deskachar and Pattabhi Jois. 6 months after I encountered Patanjali, this was back in 1974, I was in Patanjali's house. I was in Krishnamacharya's house. And I met Krishnamacharya and his son, and I was an undergraduate. And so simultaneously, I went to study yoga, but I also enrolled in a program at Madras University in Shaivite Siddhanta, which is a South Indian Shaivite tantric tradition. So I was studying the Vaishnavite yoga sadhana of Krishnamacharya. He was a Vaishnavite, and the Shaivite from a Shaivite mystic and master. And so I was like exposed to those guys. And it would what I saw was that yoga was a process by which we can really transform our lives, overcome sources of suffering, and actualize our own higher potentials. And it was very compatible with all the different religious traditions that I had been studying. And when I came back from my first journey in India, my first long journey, I lived in Madras. It was now called Chennai for about 4 years on and off, over a period of about 30 years, actually. Because now 74 is when I met Krishnamacharya. So, this month, September, makes 50 years since I met him and started my life journey in that. When I came back, I was living on Maui. That's a whole other discussion. There was a lama that Kala Rinpoche had sent to Maui, a Tibetan lama, Vajrayana. And he opened the Dharma Center. I met him when the Dharma Center was beginning. And so I became on the board of directors of a Tibetan Dharma Center. So I studied Shaivite Tantra, Vaishnavite Yoga, and Vaishnavite Tantra, Tibetan Tantra, and one of my main teachers in life was a Catholic priest, and so I have this world religion study. I'm an academic. I studied Sanskrit for many, many years, but mostly my journey has been in yoga. In the 1970s, the mid-1970s, Deskachar told me that I should go to medical school because I had already was in a master's, in a PhD track for religious studies. He said, "You're too young to study religion. You should get a medical degree." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because in the future, you'll be bringing yoga therapy into Western healthcare." And that was obviously prophetic. I didn't do a medical degree. I continued on my track of studying, but I learned anatomy and physiology and pathology, and many of the people I've trained over the years have licenses in various forms of Western health care, including psychiatry and MDs and chiropractors and psychologists. So that was prophetic. So I've been involved with yoga as a process of transformation and oriented towards realization, but also this application in relation to yoga therapy since the mid 1980s.
Well, when I hear all that you have under your umbrella, right, of knowledge and background, one of the questions that pops up is, you have all this beautiful study that you've done, and like you said, you're an academic, and yet it was within all these religious
with
studies.
Living masters, though, not just academic.
With living, yes.
That's been my greatest good fortune. The blessing of my life is being in touch with these amazing beings.
And did any of those lineages speak to you in a way that made you want to take on the religion or take on the spirituality, or is that a separate entity from all the studies that you did within the religious context?
No, that's a beautiful question. And my answer is interesting because for me, my whole life is about the inner journey. That's why I came to it. It was like I wanted to know what's going on and understand what the meaning of life and death is. From as a young age, it used to freak my parents out when I asked them questions. And so for me, they all speak to me. My path, my primary path has been through yoga. And yoga itself is non-sectarian. It's kind of uniquely non-sectarian in terms of the history of human evolution of the science of transformation. Most of the transformational processes, which exist in all the world's traditions, are linked directly to a particular religious dogma. I don't mean that negatively, but philosophy and iconography and symbolism. But all of these traditions have both symbolic language and philosophical language. Kind of philosophical language is the language of the mind, explaining what's going on. Symbolic language is more the language of the heart and how we participate with this greater mystery of life. And the yoga tradition, Patanjali's teachings were utilized by different sects within India and different forms of Hinduism, even Buddhism, arguably, and Sikhism and Jainism, and even the Christianity that's been in India since Jesus' disciple Thomas was martyred in Madras. Christianity's been there thousands of years. Those guys used the science of yoga to deepen their own spirituality. So I kind of been exposed to this non-sectarian science. And to me, I look for the deeper inner meaning of the symbolism from different faiths. And I find that the journey, you use the image of a mountain. Most of us are living in the valley. Some of us don't even look up at the mountain. Some look up and say, oh, one day. Some of us work climbing up the mountain, but we kind of find a nice, comfortable place and we hang out. Very few go all the way up. But all of the religious traditions offer a path up the mountain. They use different language to describe it and different symbol systems. So for me, the journey is about the path up the mountain, and I draw on all of them, but my own personal, I've had a lot of years with yoga, and my teachers were Vaishnavite, although Ishar was a little bit non-sectarian himself. That's a whole other story. But Krishnamacharya was certainly an Orthodox Brahmin. And then I have a lot of years with High Tibetan Lamas. So I've been influenced by them. But one of my main teachers in life was a man named Raimundo Panikar, who's actually, among other things, he's gone now, but a Catholic priest. So I've been exposed, and I spent a lot of time in Assisi, where St. Francis was from, a lot of years there and meditating there. So it's all very alive for me. I know that sounds weird, but that's just my particular life.
No, I would, my story is shorter, but similar in that when I found yoga, I found like a big enough umbrella to fit all the things that I was thinking and feeling and had come across from faith traditions and from religious tradition that made it, it made things, I could have it all in me at the same time rather than battling it out. So I understand the umbrella that yoga offers. And then I'm always curious about how people play with that underneath that umbrella. So,
well, the trick is not to be fragmented, but to have a path of practice that helps you in your own life. And if you're just sort of like digging, you know the story about the wells. If you're digging down 2 feet and then you decide, no, I should do it over there, and at the end of the day you get 22-foot holes. If you stayed in one place, you'd get there, to the water table. So you don't want to be fragmented. You don't want to fragment your energy. But it's alive in me. And the main path that has activated everything is Vedic chanting. So the chanting is for me, it's been how I've created a link to the download from the masters, that exists out there. The yoga vidya, that is the living body of knowledge. You can access it through the chanting. And that's true in other traditions, but the chanting I've done mostly has been Vedic chanting. So that would be the path that I've walked mostly in my life.
Can you talk a little bit about how that works? Like, why is chanting such an access point to the wisdom of all?
And just a little bit of context. When I was in PhD track, my approved dissertation, and then I'm what they call ABD, all but dissertation, because I got bored and frustrated by the academic arguments back when I was doing that, which is on hermeneutics and the philosophy of interpretation. That's a little bit more separate discussion. So I left the university. But my approved dissertation was on the relationship between health and religion with a focus on sound. I ended up just doing a master's degree on yoga, and the same orientation of health and religion. But the thing about sound is every tradition in the world, every religious tradition, uses chanting, uses mantra in their own form, as a way of connecting the hearts and minds of the faithful to sources of inspiration, to guidance, and to the divine. And kind of mantras and chanting is like meta language. Most of our internal dialogue and ongoing gossip and political discussions are just fragmented, and they're not really oriented towards realization of truth. But when you're chanting teachings that express reality, express the truth, it's like a kind of, almost you could say, neuro-linguistic reprogramming. It's like reprogramming your internal dialogue. The mantras sort of activate an innate potential that already exists within us. And it's a kind of thing like pranayama is different, but similar in that you can have a theoretical understanding of pranayama, maybe, but you can't really understand it until you practice it. And when you practice it, you'll experience it. Mantras like that, if you haven't practiced it consistently, you can maybe understand it intellectually. But if you start practicing mantra japa, it's going to be transformative. It changes. It's a tool, and it even means it in Sanskrit almost. Man plus tra. It's a tool through which we can transform our minds, and that's the purpose of all these practices: real deep inner transformation.
The transformation.
It's not about becoming Hindu. It's not about taking on another's religion. It's about the power of language and the power of sound. They only work if you are alive to the symbolic meaning of the mantras. Now,
that's what I wanted to ask.
Anyway, but the real power is when you're linking to their meaning.
So, yeah, my question was going to be how much do you need to understand what you're chanting? That there's chanting in Sanskrit that we can know it. There's so much around the words, but if you're chanting, say, in your own language, what's the difference there? And do you have to know what it means?
It's a great question. And in my decades of teaching, I always have students who only want to chant Sanskrit and others who never want to chant Sanskrit because they don't know what it means. So I should say that there are different layers of chanting or levels of chanting. Like in ancient India, when you were a kid growing up, you would chant certain verses that came from the Upanishad that your particular family was associated with. And those chanting are learning, and they teach you about who you are and what's your right relationship to yourself and the world around you. Or chanting Yoga Sutras, it's a way of learning what Patanjali's teachings are about. But then there's mantra chanting. That's a different level. That's the one that we're talking about, symbolic transformation. So if you're chanting text to learn, you need to understand the meaning. But if you're chanting mantras, in fact, many of the mantras, you can't exactly translate them. They all have root meanings. They all come from a root, Sanskrit root. But they're really not about the meaning, they're about the energy. The teaching is that the mantra actually is the manifestation of this energy in the form of sound. And the yantra or the mortis, like you see these guys, they're a manifestation of the same form of that energy in the form of, in that same energy in the form of light. And so mantras are like invoke the living presence of the energy that they sort of contain and reveal. So you don't have to know any deep meaning, but you have to have like a living relationship to their symbolic value, let's say.
Like it has to mean something to you.
Correct. But,
Right.
you know, I do a lot of English and Italian, and mostly English and Italian, just that's related to my own life, but chanting with people, or sometimes Hebrew or Arabic, depending upon their background. So you can chant in an other language and have extraordinary transformational potential from it. But if
That
you're
seems to be
connected to a
sometimes.
lineage, so then the chanting is not only about the chant and your own connection with the divine, or however you want to express that, but also it connects you to the lineage that's been transmitting these teachings for centuries. So that, like, you plug in, it's sort of like, to get onto this channel, I had to turn on my internet. I had to use my password, which is kind of like a mantra to access, right? And then I had to click the link, and now I'm with you. And that's sort of the lineage. Like when I click this link, now we're together. So there's also that value of mantras separate from just the mantra itself. But it connects you to your teacher and your teacher's teacher, and the whole lineage comes alive in you. That's been passed on generational.
So do you need to be given a mantra by your teacher?
Traditionally, you are initiated into mantra. There are some mantras that are self-initiating. So the answer to that is it depends. Traditionally, classically, of course, a mantra is transmitted through initiation, but there are individuals. First of all, there are some mantras that are self-initiating. You can just take them, even in the tradition, of course. And then there are some individuals that are very self-directed and who don't need that initiatory process. So there's not a black and white answer.
Okay.
Some people are helped by that, you know, because if we're caught up in our own dramas, our own narrow self-perspective, sometimes it's helpful to have someone outside of ourselves to help us see clearly and provide a pathway out. But ultimately, whether you're initiated or not, the power is in the work that you do. You have to do it yourself. It's svatantra, we say. You have to walk your own path. Even if you're initiated, just hanging out with the guru isn't going to do it. You know, you have to activate the process for yourself.
Absolutely. Yes. Um, since we're kind of on the topic of chanting and sound, and we like to talk about the chakras on this podcast, I'm wondering if you might enlighten us a little bit about, so bija mantra for the chakras, or how do chakras and sound relate, or mantras. And I know that we have a very contemporary system that we can work with, but there's also very ancient technology.
Yeah.
Sometimes these things match up and sometimes they don't. I am of the opinion that, all are welcome as long as it's useful and you're using it well with good intention. And I'd be curious to know, your thoughts on that, knowing a vast amount more than I
I'll
have.
take a deep breath. There are a lot of things in the yoga community that came from mixed sources. India, these teachings are thousands of years old. And then there's the interface of the Western scholars and practitioners with India. Like one of the big ones was Madame Blavatsky and C.W. Leadbeater and Annie Besant, who came together, and founded the Theosophical Society. So one of the great books on the chakras that's available by a guy named Arthur Avalon, he translated one of the source texts on chakra from Hatha Yoga called the Chakra Nirupana. And so, but it's been influenced by the Western mysticism overlay. And then there's all kinds of modern, let me put it in quotes, yoga teachers. So I'll put that in quotes. Or modern, I'll put it in quotes, tantric teachers who don't have any real training in the ancient tradition, and even brilliant minds like Carolyn Meese, who does work with chakras and healing. But those aren't, and many books published by sort of modern American yogis and yoginis, that are about chakras that have nothing to do with the tradition of chakras, Vedic tradition. So it's a mixture of Western psychology, pop psychology, Western mysticism overlaying Indian chakras. So there's a lot of that. So just to say that, and I don't want to offend anybody, it's all valuable, like you said, if it's put to use in a good way and with good intention. I'm kind of a traditional kind of guy. I was initiated by living masters and also with the Tibetans. And they use the chakras in a little different way in Tibet, but it's the same consistent tradition. But, one of the things, and I'll come to the question about sound in a minute, but one of the things that I learned in the lineage of Krishnamacharya is all of these practices and all of these symbols, they're not about the practices and they're not about the symbols. They're about the practitioner. And the only way they're meaningful is if that you understand how to use them in a way that helps you in your own life, your own journey up the mountain, right? And then bringing the mountain down into the valley so you can manifest it. I'm following your image, right? So that's how it's meaningful. And so I like to find a practical way of telling people about the chakras. And I'll give you two images. One is landmines, and the other is they're both. It's like a map. Chakras are like a map, and a map of landmines and a treasure map. So let me talk about landmines first. I don't know if you follow, war and all of that, but we see this in Yugoslavia and in Southeast Asia where kids are playing on fields and they step on a landmine, they get blown up. So they have to go and get like the army who laid them, and they have to have a map, and they have to go dig up all the landmines and deactivate them. Otherwise, kids, running in the field can die, right? So the image of a landmine is there's a map within us of all the potential landmines. They're like kleshas, if you study Patanjali, like sources of suffering. And each chakra sort of contains and reveals potential sources of suffering. But each chakra is also like a treasure map, that helps you find the innate potential that's buried within all of us. So the chakras are like a map of landmines and a map of the treasures. And we want to use the landmines to surface and deactivate the landmines, and then uncover and activate or actualize the treasures, the potentials that exist within us. So each of these chakras are containing both, right? And so, when we chant the mantras that are associated with each chakra, it's sort of a way of contacting the Shakti of the chakra. A lot of images of the chakras like a lotus, Padma, or a wheel. And so you're talking about the chakra Shakti or the Padma Shakti, the power of the lotus or the wheel. So you can deactivate the negative and activate the positive. So when you have an understanding of it, what Patanjali explains beautifully in one of his sutras about mantra is, he says, tad japahat tadartha bhavanam. So the way you use a mantra is you repeat it, and even with your breath, right? But you're contemplating the meaning of what you're chanting and the feeling that meaning invokes in you. So when you're working with a bija on a chakra and chanting it with mindfulness of the innate potential that exists within you, it helps you activate that potential. But prior to doing that kind of work, that would be almost like we would call manasa puja. I don't know if that phrase makes sense to you, but it's like an internal, like puja is what you do at the temple.
Yeah.
Manasa puja is you're doing it all internally. So chakra sadhana uses svadhyaya, so you surface your own dysfunctional samskaras, your own dysfunctional patterns. And then manasa puja, where you offer those negative things to the deity of the chakra that you invite into your heart and ask for purification, transformation. And then you chant the mantra where you realize that power already exists implicitly within you. So the chanting is a way of activating that divine potential that exists within you.
I'm sure you know by now that the chakras are my favorite framework for self-study and transformation. I want this beautiful system to be accessible, useful, and mind-blowingly helpful on our journey through life's peaks and valleys. To this end, at jessgoulding.com/podcast, I have created for you 2 ways to begin using the chakras and increasing your self-awareness and reduce suffering. 1, the quick 3-question quickie quiz, and 2, the more in-depth chakra check-in self-assessment. Both of these will give you access to my website with my favorite therapeutic yoga techniques for each chakra, plus an informative newsletter to help foster your understanding of this elegant system. The best way to understand yourself through the lens of the chakras is to just get started. You can find both of these tools, plus other resources, at jessgoulding.com/podcast.
Does this make sense? I know it's
Yes, totally resonating. And I've never heard it explained so beautifully and profoundly at the same time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really tracking with what you're saying. And when you're saying there's a mantra for each one, is there a text that is deciding that, or is it your desires that come from your lineage or the deity?
So, yeah, the answer is yes to all of that.
Okay.
Like there are source texts in Tantra. The Tantra is also, besides its other meanings, is a style of writing like sutra. So there are sutras like Yoga Sutras, the Sankhya Sutras, the Nyaya and Vaisheshika Sutras. There are the Brahma Sutras. That's also a style. They all are different, but that's a chronological period and style of writing. And then there's the Tantra. It's chronologically. That doesn't mean the teachings came after necessarily, but the Tantra style of writing is post the Sutra style of writing. So chronologically, so there are sort of mantras in Sanskrit and in Tibetan that offer different mantras for different chakras. And some of them, there's like the bija mantras, there's the extended bija mantras, and then there's the deities and the mantras of the deities, and the bija mantras of the deities, and the extended bija mantras of the deities. So it's a little bit complicated. And it can become confusing and fragmenting unless you are initiated, and then you understand what they all are, but you're following a path that makes sense to you for the reason that you're doing the practice and, the guidance of your teacher. It's very helpful. Yeah. But yeah, there are, the classic bejas we all know, right? Mm-hmm. Lam Ram, that one. And then there's extended, Ram, Om Ram Namaha is Manipura, but Om Ram Agnaye Namaha, because Agni has to do with the transformational fire that speaks a lot to what is contained and the information contained and revealed in Manipura. So each one's like that. I see. It's just, they're the building blocks, and you might enter just at the seed sound, and then you work with that for a while. And if it creates more curiosity and you're starting to have a good experience, then you might get curious about, well, what then is the extended? And might I find a teacher who can teach me that? And then, well, yes, then you pull in the Agni, because now you understand that it is stoking that same Manipura energy and flame. So that's beautiful. I see it very like a beautiful journey. It doesn't have to have an ending. Yeah, it's a very the tradition is, first of all, thousands of years old. So there's lots of different layers of it, and like a fine winer, I'm just teasing. It takes time, but you don't need to worry about that. You just need to begin your work. But you have someone like me that also has my own samskara is also academic, so I want to learn everything I can. My practice is very simple, but I know how to use, and when I work with individuals, helping them with their own inner practices in mantra and so forth. Knowing for a teacher, knowing more is helpful, because it's not only about what you find useful for you, it's more how you can help and how you can understand what's going on in your client, and then help them find a practice that will be meaningful for them, which may be very different than what you're using for you. So that's the reason the breadth of knowledge is more useful, not as an individual practitioner, but as a teacher. Absolutely. It's my favorite thing about yoga therapy is helping that person find the one that makes them go, oh yes, that taps into a wisdom that it like makes my heart leap when I feel that one. And then it's like, well, then do more of that. Keep doing that thing that just lit you up, or that sound or that image.
which, when we work in yoga therapy, it's a lot of the Yoga Sutras. That's what we're basing our therapeutic application from. So, from what I understand, you are writing your own translation of the Yoga Sutras right now. Is that correct? Can
Well,
we get excited about this?
yeah, I mean, I was initiated in the study of Yoga Sutras in 1974, and I began my study of it by heart. That's the Indian expression, by hearting the text, chanting.
Yeah, really taking
And
it
what
in.
Krishnamacharya said is, don't worry about the meaning, just chant it for 26 years and you'll understand it. Now I'm 50 years of chanting it, but I must be a slow learner. But, just to give you an example, in 1979, 78, 79, so 5 years after I began, I was in a landslide and I was knocked out. I was in the IC unit for 4 days in a hospital, and my friends came to visit me, and they said the nurses said he's making these weird sounds. I'm in the IC unit, and I'm not completely unconscious. I'm in and out of like that. Mm-hmm. I was chanting Yoga Sutras in the IC unit. So it's gone deep in me.
It's in your tissues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've been teaching it since the late 1970s, to students. But when the pandemic happened, among other things, I started a course on the Yoga Sutras. I started teaching it once a week. And it was an integrated science. So asana and pranayama with teaching the chanting of the sutra, then bringing the chant into asana and then in pranayama, and then doing what's called manana, where you reflect on the meaning of the words. And I'm doing grammar and the whole thing. And then nididhyasa, creating a personal meditation for the students on each sutra. And I started doing that in April 2020. April 2021 was when we began that class. And I'm working right now for Tuesday's class, this coming Tuesday, chapter 4, sutras 26 and 27. So it's taken 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And you see me sitting here, I spend probably 15 hours a week on one sutra, just doing I've been studying these for 50 years, but with deep work in the Sanskrit, in the translation, all the etymologies, and even working with some of the ancient commentaries. So it's been a long project. So yes, it could be a book. If it's a book, it's a big book. And I don't think
well, at least it's an experience.
It'll be available. I don't know that there'll be publishers in this state of publishing to produce something like that. But it'll be available, and I have several publishers interested, but I may have to make it a more simplified version. The Hindu expert at one of the publishing houses says, this is amazing, but it's too sophisticated for our market. I mean, it's an academic, it's not it's both academically grounded, but it's a living meditation. And that's what they're excited about. Every sutra is a mirror to help you understand yourself. So that's what I'm doing with that book. I should be finished before the end of the year, and then I'll work with the publishers that are interested to figure out what form they're willing to put it out there.
What to do with it.
So I'm
That's
excited.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm excited too to hear how that goes. I have a question for you that honestly, I don't remember where I heard this quote, if it is in the sutras. So I thought, well, I'll ask Gary. And that is, does it talk about in the sutras how there's 2 ways to find yourself towards, awakening or enlightenment? One is to have faith. The other, follow these instructions. Did I make that up?
No, he says, there's a sutra that says, Shraddha Virya Smriti Samadhi Prajna Purvaka Itaresham. So before he says that, he says, the quickest way, like it's all about transforming the mind, understanding your mind, transforming the mind, and then ultimately learning to make the discernment between who you truly are and your ideas of who you truly are. You know what I mean? That you're the me, the sense of me and mine, the ahankara. So our innate sense of I amness, that is not who we truly are. right? So we're identified with that. And then because of that beginningless asmita, he calls it, then we're identified with all the things that arise and the things that appear and disappear. It's intermittent asmita with our image, with our accomplishments, with our possessions, with our relationships, etc. So what Patanjali is saying is that there are many methods of clarifying the mind. The fastest method is Ishvara Pranidhana. If you have faith in God, that's a longer discussion, what that even means.
Yeah.
That's a direct path. Faith is a direct path. But otherwise, there's a path of practice. It's kind of what you're saying, like, and here's the steps that you can follow that will lead you to that level of discernment where you can discriminate between the real and the unreal, between who you truly are and your ideas about who you are. Is that sound familiar to what you're talking about?
That's the exact thing that I was wondering. Is that, did I make that up or did it come in there?
No. I mean, well, he says that the quick method is Ishvara Pranidhana, and he uses that in
surrendering.
Different...
Yeah. How can you talk just a little bit about that
sure,
version of Ishvara Pranidhana?
So first of all, Ishvara is an interesting word because it doesn't. Patanjali is not doing theology. Now, this is a technical explanation for, I don't know if your community is interested in this, but theology is the study of theos. It's the study of the nature of the divine. Patanjali is not doing theology. And in fact, Patanjali was rejected by Orthodox Hindus at a certain period because he wasn't doing theology. He used the neutral term Ishvara, and it's almost like what I would call depth, D-E-P-T-H, depth psychology. So talking about what does faith mean to a human mind? And so he used the term Ishvara, whatever it is for you. So Ishvara for a Christian could be Jesus, or for a Muslim could be Allah, or for a Hindu it could be Krishna, but it also could be Durga. So whatever that is highest for you, he says, if you have a living relationship with that pranidhana means you're dedicating your life to that. That's your highest. That's the compass. That's where you're oriented towards. That's what Ishvara Pranidhana is. That direction towards the highest. Like you don't have other worldly orientations. You're looking for God or whatever that means to you, the highest. That's kind of Ishvara Pranidhana.
I'd be surprised if just that looking makes you, not undergo the kleshas, that they would just clear up.
Yeah, well, he says, he says from that, the antaraya is abhava. The antaraya is the obstacles, abhava, they cease to exist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
he says,
the power to move mountains.
Pratyapchetana adhigamaha antaraya abhavastra. That's the sutra that he says about Ishvara Pranidhana. It means that you start seeing who you truly are. You're seeing your true nature. And the antaraya means that which blocks movement, that which blocks progress. They abhava, they no longer exist.
I see.
But then he says, don't worry, if you don't have that now, do this practice. And then he even offers, the Kriya Yoga and the Ashtanga Yoga. Tapasvadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhana is the Kriya Yoga. And there, Ishvara Pranidhana has a slightly different meaning. It's like, because it's always in relation to the context. The first way I talked about it is how it's described in the first chapter, the Samadhi Pada. And the second way it appears twice in relation to Kriya Yoga, and then in relation to Ashtanga Yoga as a niyama. I mean, this is getting technical, and I don't know how many of your students know this.
A lot of us are jamming with you, but what it's showing us, and I'll start to wrap us up here because every piece of the conversation is an excitement to know more. So as you're talking, I'm excited. Yes, I wanted to say, keep going. But this is what your teachings are for. And this is how this would be beautifully done in relationship with you. So I know that you offer courses online, you have hybrid, and now you're coming back out to teach in person. Can you tell us a little bit about where you're going to go?
The main thing that I'm doing in the Austin area is professional trainings, and we will start a new program. And, when you asked, is there these two ways, did I make it up? And I said, no, no, no. And then follow these steps. So I want to explain what our teacher training is.
Yeah.
It's following the steps of, we teach what is asana really, and how is it relevant to you as a practitioner. And it's not about performing postures. That's not how you use asana. They're not goals to maximize. They're tools to help you understand and transform your own condition. We teach pranayama. We teach how to use asana and pranayama in relation to each other. Then we teach chanting and how to use chanting and pranayama together, and how asana and pranayama, asana prepares the breath for pranayama, and pranayama prepares the mind for chanting and meditation. And what is meditation, and how do you develop meditation and use it in your own practice? And then what are these inner tantric meditation practices and rituals? So the training teaches all those steps. And then we train also people not only how to use these in their own practice, that's Vinaya, how to adapt it and calibrate it to your own needs. But then we train people how to teach it, how to read the client that they're working with and adapt the practices so that they're relevant for them. And then that leads to therapy, how to, work with people at a therapeutic level, at a multidimensional level. It can be back pain and all sort of colitis and depression. It's all of that. So that's an extensive program. It'll begin. That's vinayoga.com. The information will be there. We'll start a new program in 2025. I was going to be coming next week, but there wasn't enough time and enrollment, so I'm not going to do that. But I'll be flying in on, I don't know, the 19th or something of September, and I'll be there. And we do that out at Nation Yoga Center. But if people are interested in going deeper, I'm teaching in the lineage of Krishnamacharya and his son Deskachar. We call it Vinaya Yoga. The key of our approach is that all of these tools are not about the tools. They're about the practitioners, and how do we understand the tools and what their potential is, and then how to adapt them, sequence them, how to adapt them and calibrate them to the needs of your clients, and then sequence them appropriately, and how to take people progressively, as you use the image, up the mountain. You may find your way in as asana, somebody else will be mantra, and we'll help you find whatever way in for any individual, and then how all of the other tools are just compatible. What Krishnamacharya taught was what we call the integrated practice that uses asana, pranayama, chanting, and meditation in an integrated way. But on the other hand, you got a back pain, you're not sleeping well, you can use it, asana and pranayama, just for those purposes. But the true goal is self-realization. So we teach that whole thing. And vinayoga.com is our website. The information will be there for all the online courses and the professional programs.
Yes, we'll definitely put all that in the show notes. People are going to want to learn more and know more. This has been such a beautiful
experience. Even, by the way, we didn't say,
I know.
Let me just, I just want to say one more thing, because, when I set up this from the COVID, I did this online teaching. I decided intentionally to have these guys behind me so that when I'm teaching, I'm not looking at me, I'm looking at them. Which is, and which is a reminder to me that this is not about me. It comes through. It's a living tradition that's flowing through. But one of the things we teach even is, how do you understand what are all the deities, the gods and goddesses? What are they? Like the chakras. If chakras are microcosmic symbols, the deities are macrocosmic symbols. And just like the chakras reveal something about within us, so do the deities. So we also talk about at the end of our, not in the where we train yoga teachers and then we train therapists. It's like the end of the yoga teacher program, we teach them how to understand and work with deities appropriately, whether they're these Vedic ones or from any tradition that your clients are from, how to really use the symbolism of the gods and goddesses as well. I didn't say that during our other talks.
No, that's the top of the mountain, right? That's where I would say most of my curiosity would pull me right up to that, and I would want to know more. And what I love is that you're describing
on the Devata Yoga, it's called, if you're interested. It's already
and that's
there.
Listed on the website. Yeah, wonderful.
It's always an honor to have people interested and have an opportunity to share it with people that are sincerely interested in it, because otherwise
Otherwise, why do we do this?
Yeah, I mean, it's not about me. I have my own journey, but so much of what I've received. I feel like my Svadharma, like I was 19 when I met Krishnamacharya and then his son Deskachar. And along the way, my life has brought me as the living masters, from different traditions. And so I feel blessed, and I feel like my Svadharma is sharing it. And the more that I share it, the more I create emptiness inside. And then I receive more information. It's a living process. So teaching is part of practice for, like yourself and people like us who are engaged in the teaching of this yoga. It's part of our practice. And as we empty ourselves of sharing it, more comes in, and it's an extraordinary gift.
Kind of like a pass-through entity, but you get to hold on to some of the fruits and some of the experience, or is it just?
Well, I mean, ultimately, I hope that I'm able to let it all go, right?
Let it all go.
Vairagya, right? To be free. But yeah. I'm like a laboratory, right? I'm my own practice and experience. And I know that when I first started, we're talking about Patanjali, I started studying Yoga Sutras in 1974. What I understand about it now, same sutras, is very, very different because of my life experience.
And well, then that when I hear things like that, I'm like, that's what they mean when they'll say like living word. They're alive. The teachings are alive.
Yeah,
and
that's
we
part
don't
of why I
encounter
left the
them
university.
because were the teachings not
They
alive?
were looking for the quote critical edition. So it's like, okay, now we know what it means. And I said, no, you know what it means now, but as you mature and grow, you'll understand that at progressively deeper levels.
Well, hopefully it just gives more and more questions. This is frustrating because we would love answers, but I mean, it's just
The
the biggest
sentence the
rush in our
chairman
life.
of the religious studies department said that made me leave, he says, he said, you know what I realized, Gary? I said, what's that? He said, you're interested in wisdom. Here in academia, we're interested in accumulating knowledge. We're not in the business of wisdom. He literally said that to me.
Well, I understand
so I said,
that.
see you later. And I went to India for another 2 years.
Bye-bye. Because we're interested in wisdom. That's the game. So what's the difference between wisdom and knowledge?
Well, knowledge is, there's knowledge, there's understanding the knowledge, but then when you add another layer of wisdom, it's like knowledge and compassion in a much broader sense. Wisdom is the word jnanam and the word prajna is the difference in Sanskrit. Jnanam means knowledge, and you can say knowledge and understanding, and prajna is wisdom. So you've not only seen it in the context of whatever circumstance you're looking at, but you're seeing it in a bigger, broader context. So I always throw in the word compassion because it's just a broader. It's from the perspective of the true transformational potential of these teachings.
Well, there's a level of feeling to bringing in compassion, and I would add embodiment, like to really have the wisdom of something.
Right. It's not just here.
No, it's like it's in your cells. It's throughout your body.
Yeah, that's a great word.
To embody the knowledge, maybe is to be able to.
My English expression is living knowledge. Living embody. Your choice of the word embody, it captures it beautifully, which includes feeling.
Yes,
but not a sentimental emotions. It's wisdom and compassion. I love the Tibetan. The Dorje, the double Dorje. It's wisdom and compassion. Those are and that's what I mean by living wisdom or prajna.
Well, when you add, compassion onto wisdom, it just brings it into the heart. It pulls it down from from the manas and the mind, and it pulls it down so that you can then look back out into the world through those eyes. Like if you just have all the smarts in your brain, you're not necessarily going to see it.
You're not connected.
Reveal itself.
Compassion
in the world.
means you're in relationship with the whole world, and maybe seeing the oneness in everyone.
And that,
it's a beautiful tradition that we're lucky. You and I, in particular, since we're talking, are lucky enough to have encountered in our lives. Although the ancients say the reason we've encountered it is this is not our first rodeo. It's not our first time around.
Oh, that's exciting. So that's I had not come into that information before. So people who are interested in yoga seems to be, there are a lot of seekers for sure. And seekers are born out of a genuine desire to know more or to remember what they already knew.
Yeah.
That to me is what the
And
seeking is.
having the pattern, the deep, we call it vasana, deep within, maybe from, you don't have to believe this metaphysically, but they would say from a previous birth,
Hmm.
and then we're just continuing our journey.
Yeah.
When I was 19, my teacher said, don't think you know. Actually, it was when I came back. So I was probably somewhere between 21, around 21. He said, don't think you know what you know about yoga from what you learned from me. Of course, my conception was that I knew everything I knew about yoga from what I learned from him. And he said, no, you're a yoga brasta. And I didn't know the Sanskrit back then. So when I looked it up, I said, fallen yoga? He said, fallen. He said, it means that you died you were in yoga in the past, but you died before you completed. So if you're questing for meaning of life via yoga, likelihood is this is not your first time around with it.
Interesting.
It's an explanation, who knows if it's, I'm not going to
I
claim
love
it's
the
true.
questions I love the questions that arise when I hear that and the curiosity that it sparks. So we'll just keep following those curiosities and sparks up and down the mountain.
Beautiful. Curiosity, right?
Right.
The right
Right.
kind of.
Yeah. We'll put everyone in
Should
touch
I
with
say
you.
one more thing?
Of course.
I know this is a crazy thing, but my teacher told me because I was this religious studies student. So when I was probably in my early 20s, if you want to know the real purpose of yoga, he said, don't take this the wrong way. It's preparation for the moment of death. Because he says when you die, it's not over. And, what happens to you afterwards depends on the momentum you've created in this life. And so.
That's Shavasana.
Well, that's another
Really.
discussion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're saying the study of yoga, all the yoga is preparation for the moment of death.
Yeah, the study and practice, particularly the practice of yoga.
The practice of yoga, is it so that when you're at the end of your life, you have worked through your karma, you have done everything that you can
Well,
do
that's ideal,
to,
of course.
yes.
Right? You want to extend your lifespan, not so that you can accumulate more possessions, so that you can work through your karmas. But it's really about where your mind is. So I'll tell you this story. We'll end with this story. He told me this story about Hiranyakasipu, who's a demon. And this is coming from one of the Puranas. So Hiranyakasipu is a demon, and he's being a demon out there, creating war and killing people, and he has an army. And people are suffering, so they get together and they pray for relief from suffering. And Narasimha incarnates. Narasimha means half man, half lion. He's one of the incarnations of Vishnu. And so let me go one second back. So Hiranyakasipu was a great yogi, which already was interesting for me. You mean a great yogi can be a demon? And my teacher said, of course. If you're an asshole and you go to a meditation class, you become a very focused asshole. He didn't say it to me that bluntly, but just,
But it's
you know
true.
what I mean? So yeah. Hiranyakasipu was such a strong practitioner that Lord Shiva appeared for him and granted him a boon. And the boon was that I couldn't be killed by man nor beast in the day or at night, on the earth or in the sky. And so Shiva grants him this boon. So he's out there doing all this evil and killing people, and people pray for relief, and Narasimha appears. So Narasimha is not a man nor beast. He's half man, half lion. He goes out into the battlefield at dusk, so not day or night, and he takes Hiranyakasipu across his knee, so not on the earth or in the sky, and he breaks his back. And so Hiranyakasipu's dying, but in the battle, his oldest son was there, and his oldest son was named Narayana. So as he's dying, he's saying he wants to see his son. So he says, "Oh, Narayana, Narayana, where are you?" And then he dies. So Yama, the god of death, comes with his noose to take Hiranyakasipu to hell. And just then Narayana appears. And Narayana says, Yama, where are you taking Hiranyakasipu? And he's a demon, I'm taking him to hell. And Narayana says, no, on his last breath, he said my name, and he takes him to heaven. I'm having chills, by the way. I remember when my teacher told me that story, I was in my 20s. So where your mind is at the moment of your death will determine what happens next, right? And so you're practicing so that you create the momentum in your mind so that when you approach the end of life, your mind's in the right place. You're not freaking out or in fear or what about my this or my that. You're not about me and mine. You're
right with God.
To divine.
Mm-hmm. What a beautiful
Very different than loosening your hamstrings and mastering headstand.
Yes, the hamstrings are definitely the avenue in for many people, but once they get there, hopefully it's beyond that, and that's the space that I'm so happy and lucky and blessed to share with you. So, thank you for coming on and teaching. All the best to you and
your community, and thank you.
I look forward to seeing you at a training.
I hope so. Yeah, me too. Thanks so much for a lovely time together.
Thank you.